Mullah Nasruddin took his heavily pregnant wife to the tailor shop to buy her a new kaftan, and after the tailor brought out his display of garments, the mullah's wife finally chose one that she liked, and the hard bargaining began. But the tailor was a hard bargainer, and after a while the mullah's wife left in a huff and walked down the road with the mullah. But they hadn't gone very far when the tailor went chasing after them and said, "Mullah, Mullah, please have your wife buy my kaftan, because you know what they say about pregnant women, that if they don't get what they want, they'll put the evil eye on you." And the mullah looked at the tailor and said, "You know that's a lot of superstitious nonsense." And the tailor said, "But yes, but what if it's true? What if it's true? Please ask your wife to buy my kaftan." So this next story that's to be told is a what if it's true story, because it comes from the tradition of Buddhist tantric practice at a time when Hinduism was spawning the great tantric Buddhist traditions that are still extant today. And the stories that are told are about the great siddhas who were instruments of bringing this change about. So it's the story of this great king who had come under the tutelage of one of those great siddhas called Tailor, and in the course of that tutelage he had attained to the state that's called Mahamudra, or what we would perhaps call realization. And along with that realization came what is called the siddhis, or the magic abilities that are judged so even today. But the king kept all of these abilities to himself. He never let them be known to the populace at large, so the populace just saw him as a just and fair king. But it so happened that in that kingdom he had inherited such that there was a great deal of karma. So the kingdom had been beset by famine and flood and wars. So with his abilities, the king had it so that a great bell was constructed, a great bell of brass, and he had it strung under a huge tree in the town square. And he told his advisors that when any tragedy or such like befell them, that they should ring the bell. And so this was what happened. The bell was rung on occasions when famine was imminent, or flood, or warlike tribe trying to take over the kingdom. And with the amazing vibrations that emanated from this bell, a state of peace, tranquility, and prosperity took over the city, and all was well. But one day, a troop of low-caste itinerant entertainers came to town, and the king invited them into his court to entertain them. And when they did, the king noticed amongst them a beautiful, young, pure maiden. And he decided that he was going to take this maiden for his consort. So he approached the maiden's father, who was the head of that troop. But the head of the troop, the father of the maiden, was quite aghast. "How can you, the king of such high caste, take someone of us who is so lowly, of the lowest caste?" But the king would have none of it, so he had some scales brought from his treasury, and he weighed the young maiden, and he gave her weight in gold to the father, who could not refuse. And so he took this young maiden as his consort. But this being the case, that the laws of the land and the rules were so rigid that there could be no relationship between what was considered the high and the low, that he had to keep it a secret, and he managed to do so for 12 years. But after this time, the gossip mongers caught note of this, and so it was known abroad that the king had as his consort one of the lowest class, against all the laws of the land. So despite the fairness and even the consideration that the populace had for their king, their rules were so strict within them that they called for his abdication, because he had broken this fundamental law. So the king could do nothing else but concede. So, giving his kingdom over to his son, he left with his consort, and they went off into the forest, where for 12 years they led a blissful life, practicing their meditations, cavorting with the animals and the creatures of nature. But in those 12 years, the kingdom again became the recipient of those laws of karma, and the bell was broken, and famine and flood and wars came back to the land. The son who had taken over the throne and the people gathered together to agree that they should seek out their king and ask him to come back and rule them. So a deputation was sent out to try to find the king. But the search went on for some time, and he was not to be found. But then, just when the group who had been sent were about to give up and return unsuccessful, the youngest amongst them noticed that they had entered a part of the forest that was silent. Not even the sound of a bird or a cricket was to be heard. And then they noticed that in the distance there was a glow. So following this glow, they saw their king sitting under a great tree in a state of meditation, a great illumination around him. And out on the lake by which the tree stood, there was his consort, stepping from lotus leaf to lotus leaf, gathering the nectar from the flowers for her husband. They were totally in awe, but they did not invade the privacy of that place, but hurried back to the kingdom to inform the now king, who immediately sent a messenger to ask the old king to return to resume his rule. When the old king heard the plight of the people, he said, "Yes, I will come." And so, some time later, to the great surprise and really awe and fear of the populace, one day they saw riding down the main street their king, riding a wild tiger, waving above his head a whip that was in the form of a venomous snake. Behind him, his consort. The people were in great awe and fear of this sight. But when they begged him to take over the rule once again, he said to them, "You have forced me to abdicate because of the law of the land, stating that one of high station cannot consort with one of low station. So you took away my caste. This does not enable me to rule you once again." There was a great sigh of regret amongst the people, but the king said, "This can be expiated if we die. So, if you will, cause a bier to be made, burn us, and then we can resume our rule in this new state, no longer bound by the rules which were present in this present form." So the people gathered the most fragrant wood they could find, and they built the bier. The old king and his consort sat on the bier, and it was lit. The fire burned for 7 days and 7 nights, the fragrance of the wood filling the air all around. Strangely, at the end of that time, the fire was gone, and there sat the king and his consort in a great effulgence. The people gasped in awe, and then the king spoke, and he said, "I will take over the rule of this kingdom if you will do what I have done." But the people said, "How can we give up the laws of our systems, our caste, as you have done? How can we go against the rules of a society that has been created?" And as they watched that king and his consort in a state of union, rose up out of the great effulgence, leaving the populace to their fate, their destiny. Why is it said that this is what if it's true story? Why is this story described as a what if it's true story. Because indeed, at a level, it is. Even in this tantric tradition, those stories that are told about these said to be great souls who were nothing more than the traders, the shepherds, the workmen, although amongst them were kings and princes. They had not only arrived at the place that has been called so many different names, but attained those abilities that come with that state, are said to be true stories. So why is it that it's now described, this story, as a what if it's true story? How does it resonate with us now? Where does it fit in this society, this place where society's rules apply seemingly? Where are you now? Are you still doing the dance? Are you still a gladiator in the arena of life? Do you still have armor and shields, weapons? What is this place where we're no longer bound by beliefs, traditions, superstitions, laws, truths?